you so much for joining me on the Creative Awakening Now podcast. I'm your host, David Matters, and I'm here to bring you stories, interviews, and insights relating to the topics of creativity, inspiration, and practice. My intention is to connect with other people who employ a heart-centered approach to the artistic process and to share this profoundly inspiring content with anyone who cares to hear it. I hope you enjoy. This is a dream, and a dream is never the same. My guest this week was Josh Rivera. Actually, Josh doesn't really have much of a bio, so I'm not going to go through it, try and make it up right now. But Josh is a fantastic musician. He's been playing handpans and different percussive instruments for most of his life, and now he builds and tunes handpans as well for Saraz Handpans in outside of Asheville area. And so one of the things on his website, he says that in the course of my 3 years as a developer and main tuner for Saraz Handpans, I have tuned over 300 new Saraz instruments and have experience in tuning well over 300 instruments from various builders, including, forgive me if I get these wrong, Panart Hang, Bellart, Pantheon Steel SpB, Symphonic Steel, Echo Sound Sculpture, Ayasa, CFoulke, Meraki, Shellopan, Makai, and the list continues. Those are all different builders of handpans. So this was a really cool conversation because I absolutely love handpans. I love their sound. It's just so hypnotic and beautiful. And anybody who's ever heard one, if you've never heard a handpan, or you don't know what they are, or you don't know much, you're about to learn a whole bunch, and I'm sure you're going to be a fan. If you are a fan already and you know all about them, then you're going to love this interview because we go deep into it, and we talk about kind of the history. We talk about his creative journey first, Josh's creative journey, and what led him to music, what got him into the drums and percussion, and how he kind of transferred from a kit to playing more world music, different hand percussion instruments, tabla and doumbek and all kinds of stuff. And then he found the handpans, and it basically took over his entire life. And he goes into that, and it's a great conversation because we were just talking about being music nerds and how fun that is, and how deep that rabbit hole goes. So you're definitely gonna enjoy that if you're into these kind of things. And he plays a couple improvisational pieces that he just jams on. He's been playing handpans for, I don't want to say exactly now because I can't remember 12, 15 years or something like that. And he's just phenomenal. He's got such a beautiful touch. We got some songs in there, and we just get really into kind of like the philosophy of creativity and like what inspiration comes from, and just following that and not following what the mainstream world tells us to believe and feel about being a good musician, and all those good things, all the good things you can usually expect to encounter on the Creative Awakening Now podcast. So I know you're gonna love it. I hope you check out his work. I'll have his website for his tuning. He also does some mastering and stuff for musicians, and I'll have the link up in the show notes, so you can check that out. Please go on over to creativeawakeningnow.com and check out everything I have going on with my music and everything here, podcast, blog, published writing. If you sign up for the email list, which I really hope you do, you get a free ebook that I wrote some time back. So I hope you do that. If you want to support the podcast, please go leave a rating and review. People keep telling me that they're gonna, and I haven't seen it. So that I would be grateful. Go into iTunes. It's really simple. Just give me a 5-star review if you're feeling good about it. Leave some comments, some feedback. It's really a helpful thing. So all that. And stay tuned. I got a lot more coming up, a lot more personal episodes as well. Like I said, I got some good things I want to talk about. So, check back in. Hope you have a good one. Much love. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And thank you, Josh, for agreeing to do this with me today and inviting me to your house and all that.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. It's a pleasure. You just took me on a little tour of your house and your workshop and all that. It's super cool. I definitely want to get into handpans and get into that process. And I'd like to like dig into it a little bit and like learn about it too, you know.
Sure.
But maybe you could just start us off by talking about kind of your creative path, like where you started getting interested in music and things of that creative nature, and how it's kind of brought you to where you are now.
Sure. Yeah, I guess my introduction to music, and I guess my addiction to it came from actually church, believe it or not. And I was like, when I was young, my parents were very, very religious, and but we went to a First Assemblies church when we were young. They had like music, it was like the church was like loud music, and like really, Pentecostal. That's the speaking in tongues. It was like the party church, right? And but they had. I'd never realized that you could actually drum passionately, and I think when I was going to church as a child, I remember seeing a drummer. This is in Mississippi, and no, I think it was in California at the time still. But he had, it was cool. It was like a church that had a 7-piece drum set, and I was like, man, this place is gonna rock. And I was pretty young, and just watching him play drums, and he was a really good drummer. He was doing all kinds of cool cymbal things and like really small. It was just, as a child, I just didn't know that this existed. I was like, I only heard music really, or watched it. I don't know how to explain it, I guess, but it just kind of like stuck out. I was like, oh, cool, you can actually use these drums and cymbals to enhance and feel something, even in a church setting, which as a child, I had a hard time connecting. But I got addicted, and then I started to, like after church, I would stick around and start tapping on him. And then one day he came back and he was like, hey, you want to sit down with me? I'll show you how to do some stuff. And I was probably about 7 or 8 at the time.
Oh, wow, you were young.
Yeah, really young. And I just remember being super focused. Like every time we went to church, I was like just zoned in on the drum set. Nothing else mattered. I had no idea what the pastor was saying. Even when they weren't playing, I was still staring at the drum set. Yeah. And so he's, the drummer would, after church, sit down with me for like 10, 15 minutes and just kind of like show me some stuff. And then I would play until I was kicked out and told to go home. And so that was that's when I first realized I was obsessed, addicted to drums and all that good stuff. And then it just built from there. Started playing drums in church a lot, and then as I got into school, like middle school, joined the jazz band. And the ultimate drumming experience is that you got to be a good jazz drummer if you want to be a good drummer. So I had some good teachers there that kind of walked me through some, how to play jazz, which was really hard to switch over to, from like church straight 4/4 to now we're gonna do jazz. And I was like, my brain doesn't handle it.
Church music being like the least jazz music.
So far from jazz, yeah. Unless you go to a Baptist church. Now those Baptist drummers nowadays, man, I'm seeing some new videos. They're pushing, but so I did that, and then percussion. I started getting into percussion music because of the Beastie Boys. I remember the first time that I was in maybe, 9th grade or something, and a friend of mine in class was listening to something, and I was like, what are you listening to? And it's like, Beastie Boys. Never heard of them. My parents wouldn't let me really have that kind of music in the house. It's like everything had to be approved through them if a CD came through. And Beastie Boys would have been right out. Same with like Tool and everything else that I like. And they had, their instrumental jams had so much percussion going on. And my mind had never heard like this fusion of, like a hip hop-ish kind of a sound, but then like jamming out percussion and just kind of bringing this whole new element into it. And I was just obsessed with that. And the next thing you know, I was like, now I need to play congas or whatever's in this, this album. And so I started in a jazz band. I would start picking up whatever random percussion things I was into. And then that kind of sparked a whole nother realm of just getting addicted to drums in general. And then YouTube came out in 2006-ish, somewhere in there. And then that's when, as a North Dakota boy, I was mind blown when I started discovering Eastern drumming and Eastern percussion and tabla and doumbek and all this stuff. And I was like, humans can do this, like watching a master tabla player. Well, it was just like, if you've never seen one and you're into drums at all, it just is mind blowing. And so then I was like, my God, there's, it was like just the tiers just kept on. Every couple of years there was this new tier of like what can be done, and how far can you push the limit. And then at the same time, that kind of led into finding a video of Handpan. And so being a drummer all my life, there was never any I didn't really learn how to play piano. I didn't really learn how to play guitar. I couldn't play any music. I was always just the rhythm guy. And the handpan came out and it was just like the molding of everything. It's like tabla playing. Tabla skills can work there. Doumbek skills can work on it. Just djembe, light-handed djembe playing. There's just so many techniques, and you put them on the handpan, you can use all of them.
Yeah, and you're playing melodies.
And then you get melodies and then it just it kind of molded that understanding of what it's like to play percussively and then how to play melodically and then marry the two. And that was really hard because a lot of new handpan players, especially myself, when I first started, was just very much drum, just hand drumming all over it, and it was really sloppy and fast and hard and just whatever. It just it was pretty bad. When I look at my old videos now, I'm like, I should delete those, but they're nice memories. And so then it's just, once I got those, it was pretty much I stopped practicing tabla, I stopped practicing everything I had, and I just put all my focus into handpan. And so that's kind of where most of that, it's been pretty consistent. It seems like most of my life that it's always been this new percussion or this new drum drive. And it's for a while it was the drum set, and that drove me into this band I was in for, like we were talking about, 13 years. And it was a really prog metal band, and so that's also where I kind of started hearing a little bit more about fusing different time signatures with melody and big wall sounds for a while, and long builds and all that stuff. And then hearing Tool, they had tabla on their live album with Lok Dutta, toured with them, and that's actually the first time I ever heard tabla, but I didn't know what it was. I just assumed it was some a digital drum going on. And then when I saw a video of it, I was just when YouTube came in, I actually saw what the video was, and I saw the player that traveled with Tool. And I was just like, oh, that's a real person doing all that. Oh, he's doing that with one hand. That's nuts, So
tabla's mind-blowing.
It is, yeah. So that's kind of basically been about kind of in a nutshell, just going one drum to the next.
But now you're actually building handpans and tuning them, and you have your whole shop. And can you talk about that process? And actually, I wanted to ask you too, when you were saying you got into YouTube, when it kind of first started, were handpans because they're a pretty new instrument.
Very new.
Was that a revelation that came out that was instantly on YouTube that you saw, or was it kind of something that trickled in later? Because I don't know how long they've been around exactly.
Yeah, so the handpan, so the original handpan was the Hang by Panart, and they released the first one pretty much in the wild, I think around 2001-ish. Okay. And so YouTube came out around 2005 or 6, roughly.
Okay.
And so it's just about 4 or 5 years old. And so for me, when I was watching YouTube, I was basically just watching every world percussion. Once I fell into that rabbit hole, I was looking up every person I could find. I was just constantly typing in world drums, world percussion, blah, blah, blah. And then I want to say it was Gupri Chana, but he's a tabla player, was playing the handpan for some concert, and the camera was in the back of the concert, right? So there's all these people, and you can kind of see just the top of the guy's head, and he's looking down, and I can't see what he's playing. But all this sound was just coming out, and it's something I'd never heard the sound combined with this percussive attack to it combined, and I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I am obsessed. And I spent hours on the internet. And so at the time there was only a few videos, but no one really knew what it was. It was people were coming out with videos from around the world, because this originated in Switzerland. As you can imagine, it's slowly but trickle out from there. And so Europe, was blowing up with all these videos of it coming out, people busking in parks and on the street, and everyone's like, what is this instrument? No one knew what to call it, so I didn't know what to even look for. I was typing in everything I could think of as metal sounding piano, or all these things, it's drum that has notes, I didn't know what to put in. And then it took me I think I was on the internet literally for 4 hours. It's I don't know what it is, but I've got $1,500 in my savings account, and I don't care what it costs, I'm just gonna get it. And then I found out you can't just buy them, you can't even find them really. And So I got really lucky. I found a forum. And again, I didn't really know much about forums. Like forums are this whole new thing to me too.
Yeah.
And there was a forum, and I happened to see a picture of this weird looking thing, and looked like a UFO. You know, like the whole stereotype about the instrument is like definitely looked like a UFO of some sort. And I was like, that looks interesting. And someone had put the word drum next to it. And so I was like, okay, well, what is this? And luckily I just fell into it. And I was like, I clicked on the right picture. Yeah. And then that took me to this forum. And it was all for this instrument. It was all about the Hang. Yeah. And it was all these nerds, who were all obsessed with this instrument and like know so much about it or just talk about it. Because at the time there were so few people that had them, and connecting with them was even harder. Yeah. And so that's that forum kind of got me. They pointed me in the right direction to finally get a hold of one, and it was a really funny story because someone on the forum was like, you know what, you should contact this guy named Ron Kravitz, I believe, and he has connections with Panart, and you can get a hold of him. Like, cool. So I emailed this guy, and he's like, you should get a hold of this guy named Dave Keats in Canada. He's got, he's like, my list is full, but he's going to go up there soon in the next, 6 months. And I guess Panart, once a year would open up and sell instruments, and then they'd have kind of like a big, little gathering, and people would come out there and pick out their instruments, hang out for a night or two. And, it kind of it was a really neat way to go about it, right? And so I was like, well, I can't go to Switzerland, I'm not going to, how am I going to get a hold of this? And, so I messaged Dave Keats in Canada, and he said that I'm going out there soon. He's like, oh, so the best part about the story too was that I emailed Dave Keats and said, hey, I'm really interested in this. I got your name from Ron Kravitz, and I don't know what to do, but I'm really interested in acquiring a Hang. And I got an email back within a minute, something like that, minute and a half. And so I clicked send, and I turned around. I was talking to my wife about something. I looked back, and he's like, I'm heading out there soon. If you want one, I need $1,500 sent to Switzerland to this address, all this stuff. And I'm sitting there looking at it, and he's like, but I need to know, he's like, there's literally 2 spots left, and I need to know by tonight or tomorrow or something. And I'm sitting there, it's just like, oh God. And I look back at my wife, and she's doing something. I look at the computer, and I'm starting to think, I was like, this has got to be a scam. Yeah. Someone's just sitting around waiting for some jerk to come down and send an email and send him $1,500 out of nowhere. It's like, this is way too quick of a response. And I did it anyway. I looked at her, and I looked back at the computer, and I said, yes, I'll do that. I'll have it sent tomorrow. And then I closed up the window, looked back at my wife, and I was like, we need to talk. I just spent our whole savings account on this instrument.
Oh my God, you must have a very understanding wife.
She is the sweetest thing in the world. And I figured, I was like, I never asked my parents for money. Worst case scenario, I was like, I'll just pay them back or something. And so I called my dad too. I was like, just in case this ends up being a bad deal, can I borrow $1,500? And he thought I was crazy, but he is also big into percussion and music, and he knows I never ask for money. And so it's like, if this is the first time you're asking me for something, it's for a drum. I mean, I can support that. And so, but so that's how the Hang. And then I ended up being in my lap 3 months later. And for that time, for someone to get a Panart Hang directly from them, and I got to pick my scale, was so incredibly rare. And such a hard story to come about. And so it was almost like it just kind of literally fell into my lap. The whole thing just pointed me in that direction. And that was in 2006, and it's 2019 now. And it's really kind of been 13 years of handpan-centric lifestyle. So
that's awesome. I love when people get super passionate about things, and I know exactly how that feels when you're on YouTube's such a great resource for that. You find a musician, or you find an instrument, or you find whatever it is, the style of music, and just nerd out on it. I do it so hard. When I first got into West African music and heard Ali Farka and heard a couple of these other guitar players playing this style that I had never heard before, and I was like, what is this? And I got obsessed, and I looked up every video I could find, study the backstory, study the history, study the culture, all that stuff. And it's such a cool thing that technology provides, actually, in that way, which is, and we always have such bad things to say about technology, but it is that part of it especially, it's a serious blessing when you're a musician. It feels good.
Especially, and I feel like I said it a few times this year too, is I feel like YouTube changed my life. And literally it was the conduit, it was the window into this whole world of people that didn't have to be famous to be amazing, you know, and that was the best part. Is like you're watching videos of people doing things that I would have never fathomed the most professional guitar player in my life being able to do. And this guy just sitting in his basement just like, oh, you know, it's just what I do on the weekend. And it just starts shredding, you know, and same with like percussionists and artists and everybody, you know. It's like, it was like this window into the world of like not needing to be famous to be amazing. And again, small town Josh thinking was that, you know, if you're good, you're going to be out there and famous. You know, that's what it takes or something. And it just kind of changed how I viewed the world in a lot of ways. So
that's an interesting point, because I think that, you know, we, like you say, we kind of equate skill with like fame, and that's like the only way you get that good is because you're famous or you want to be famous. But really, like, passion, you know, exists regardless. Like if you just love something enough and you don't, you know, maybe you don't want to be a rock star traveling around the world all the time, like that crazy kind of life, but you still love this instrument, you know. And those people are out there. And sometimes even better or more inspiring than any famous person doing that, you know. It's a cool point to look at, because we so easily overlook it, you know. We just quantify skill with, you know, some kind of like, put them on a pedestal, like, oh.
Exactly. I could never get that good. There's actually a really good podcast I listened to. I don't remember who it was, but they were talking about creativity and the lie that people have within them, that they won't even start something because they just assume that to be that good you have to be gifted, or you have to be this, or you have to be that. And it's just like, they're just like, I'll never be able to achieve that. And, you know, there's a reason why they're so famous in doing this, and it just instantly will stop you. And I felt like the same way up until I started watching YouTube and seeing people just in the basements doing this is just what we do, and we do it because we love it, not because, like I said, we're trying to be something. And that's always, I think, you know, the I guess the killer of creativity is trying to do it to be something other than just passionate and it's like, you know, there's definitely like cool things about trying to push your boundaries, you know, by challenging yourself. Like, well, if this famous person can do this, you know, it's kind of nice to be inspired by that and push, you know, use that to help push yourself along. But if the goal is to be famous by doing this, most famous people talk to her, almost all of them said, like, this was an accident. Like, I was just doing things and people liked it, and you know, it just kind of took off. But
it's such a weird lie that we've been fed for so long, that, like, you know, it's even like growing up, I remember I was, even before I started playing music, really, I was discovered like being able to play music as living late in life, because I grew up way out in the sticks in Pennsylvania, and like, never even saw a live band until I was, you know, almost probably close to being a teenager. Like, you know, maybe there was somebody at the bar jamming or something, but like going to a concert was this novel thing. But when I started getting obsessed with it, and I just told people, you know, in high school and stuff, like, I want to be a musician, you know, immediately people, oh, that's nice, nice, but you really think you're going to be famous? Like, really, you want to be a rock star? It's like, I never said that.
No, I just want to play.
I could be a musician. But we have integrated that into ourselves, and I think our generation, you know, the generations to come, are maybe some of the first that are actually like getting beyond that and learning that creativity is this force within itself that doesn't require acknowledgement, recognition, fame, money. You know, it's purely worth it for the sake of itself. You know? And anybody who does it, they're not doing it because of, you know, well, I can't say anybody, but most people, they're not doing it because of this desired result. You know, they didn't start doing it for that. You know, they start doing it because they love it. You know, you didn't start nerding out over handpans because you want to be the most famous handpan player in the world. You know, you get this serious passion and you can't help it.
Exactly.
It drives you.
It's like I can't even think about what thoughts were going on other than just like, that just is so awesome. You know, I don't know what's going on, but it is so awesome, and I just can't stop being drawn to it. And then everything after that it just kind of takes you, you know. So you just fall into something that is natural for you, and you just get kind of taken away with it, and then it almost becomes effortless. You know, it's like you can work hard and practice and do all that stuff, but it's like it becomes effortless to do it because you just love it. You know, it's just like just going outside. It's sunny outside. I just want to go outside. And I'm not just like, well, I should go out there because I have to. It's sunny. It's just like, it's nice. You know?
Feels good. Yeah, it's a cool thing for sure. And I think that I talk about creativity all the time, obviously, and one of the biggest things that comes up for people is insecurities, like I'm not good enough, you know, I'll never be good enough. Like there's so many other people who are better than me, you know, those things. And it's like, well, you're never going to get better with those kind of ideas, you know, like if you're not willing to push yourself for the sake of pushing yourself, you know, you're getting better because you love to play or you love to paint or you love to, you know, move or ride a, you know, skateboard, whatever it is. Like you're doing it because you love it. And the more you love it, the better you get. You know, it's this natural progression. It's kind of crazy. You know? It's that simple.
And it's almost like, it almost comes down to just like, it's almost like you're getting better because you're getting bored. It's like, you know, I've been doing this so much and I'm just kind of like, I'm like in the stagnant space of just being like, I've been practicing the same rudiments or I've been just doing the same thing. And I'm kind of like, I don't want to get bored with it because I love it, but what can I do next? And that's when, you know, you can like start either just trying new things or then, you know, reaching out to finding those amazing players and using them as more of like that stepping stone of being like, this is what's still possible and I can't even come close to that. And that's my new challenge to make it, you know, I still want to do this, but I need a new challenge of some sort. And again, you know, it's like, it's really, I mean, I never really think it's a bad thing to like use the challenge as a way to like step out and go perform better either. You know, it's nice to go out and be able to perform and present, you know, this awesome thing. You know, it's like I may not want to be famous, but I would love if I'm going to go downtown and play. And, you know, I used to play at this really nice restaurant in North Dakota. It was once a month for a weekend. And I would just get to the point where after a couple months, I was like, I just feel like I'm doing the same thing all the time. And like, even though there are new people all the time, I'm getting bored myself. And so how can I just make it more entertaining for myself in the end? You know, a lot of this, I think a lot of getting good is a very selfish thing. Almost like I just really personally just want to get better because I'm just bored, you know? And how can I not be bored with this anymore? And because I'm not going to stop, you know, it's like I'm not going to stop playing handpan. I'm most likely just going to look for something to really push me, and that's what's great about, again, connecting with other players, connecting online, getting with other people, and just seeing, it's like, you know, there's always somebody out there that's pushed much farther than you, like all the time in almost any medium, you know.
Yeah, that's like a blessing and a curse too, because if you let it get to you and you want to be the best, there's always somebody better than you. Probably a couple thousand at least, you know? And if you play like a more common instrument like guitar or something, then you're really in trouble.
You're in a big pool, you know?
And you can use it for inspiration or you can use it as like beating yourself up, you know. But it's all how you look at it, I think.
Definitely
how you approach it. But you know, I wanted to ask you about, in regards to the handpan being a new instrument, you know, 20 years old or something like that, 19 years old. A lot of, not everybody obviously, but a lot of people, they get into an instrument and there's, you know, hundreds if not thousands of years, you know, of this whole backstory of what the instrument sounds like. You know, here's this repertoire of songs to learn. You know, here's this pattern, these scales, all these things, you know, and like your playing is kind of comes out of that, you know, like you learn the guitar. Oh, I like this kind of music. Okay, I'll follow this avenue. And here's, you know, 150 years of these traditional songs that I can learn or whatever, you know. I'm curious if you could just kind of like give the history of the handpan, like what it kind of came from, and also like how a new instrument has evolved in that short time even. And like, how do people learn? You know, is it fully like free form, or is there things you can do or to, you know, to come off of? Or?
You know, it's kind of cool. One of the reasons why I got one of the multiple reasons I got so obsessed with the instrument was because it had no traditional rules to it. Learning tabla, learning doumbek and frame drum and cajon and everything that kind of almost has like a set way of playing, or like there's a school of thought behind it, or there's, you know, traditions built upon it. Like this, you know, especially tabla, as you can imagine, has like a deep rooted tradition, and how to play it is very strict, you know, in a lot of ways, and for a lot of good reasons. I mean, to ascend to where people have in the tabla world, you have to have such a practice, and like there has to be almost I don't know, a guide of sorts to get there. And so I always found it really intimidating because I knew that without a teacher and living in North Dakota, there's no one who could teach me how to play tabla or like how to get past a certain level and all that stuff. And so in ways, learning those instruments was almost frustrating because I felt like I was doing it wrong all the time, and that there was always something I was missing, or and because you see a lot of stuff, like this is how you do it. And then the handpan, I was like, it was such a relief to find something that nobody could tell me I was playing it wrong because nobody knew what it was, and so it was just this crazy freedom in an instrument to just explore and have no preset notion of what I'm supposed to do. And over the years, it's been kind of fun to watch it. It really started off as pretty much that. It really started off as quite a solo instrument. A lot of people playing by themselves, just jamming out, blissing out, busking, and just kind of going nuts. And it was just it instantly brought out personality. It's really cool because you could take the same instrument, put it in 10 different people's hands, and it's going to sound, and it's like most instruments, but this one, even though it's only, say, 8 notes, the Hang had 8 notes, 9 notes, and you're pretty much staying in a D minor, and so if you give this D minor to 10, 15 different people, and it's only these notes to play with, it's amazing how differently they can approach it. And so, if you have someone that was really percussive, they would approach it with that style. If you had someone that was really melodic, played a lot of piano before they ever played a drum, playing the handpan, they'd come out with more melodic style, not just ride the center note and make it like the bass jam note. They would really write stuff in it. Like Manu Delago was one of the first ones that I watched that truly composed on the Hang, and it was just mind blowing. And so watching it develop, it's kind of cool because it still doesn't have a lot of rules to it. It's still, biggest thing is not hitting it too hard. Just trying to how to draw out the best sound tends to be the biggest rule for the instrument. And other than that, it's still pretty much a completely freely creative instrument that combines a lot of things, and it makes it one of the nicest things about it too is that it truly is like the gateway instrument for a non-musician. So totally, if someone's never played music in their entire life and they've always wanted to, it's really hard to learn how to play a violin. A violin, you got just to get the strings to sound nice. Playing guitar, playing piano, playing so many instruments takes a long time before you can really get that feeling of being lost in the music. There's a lot of practice to it. And the handpan is kind of a shortcut. Aside from getting a good touch on it and drawing out the best sound that you can, aside from that, you're pretty much able to sit down and instantly feel like understand what it feels like to make music. And sometimes that alone is enough to push people in this new path of being like, I want to go farther with that. And a lot of instruments can be really intimidating. Like I said, the piano and guitar and all these things can be really intimidating because there's so much going on. And with the handpan, you can kind of sit down, get that feeling from it, and then suddenly maybe now I want to take it into something else like a guitar or piano because now I have all the notes. And the handpan is beautifully restricted. I really do enjoy that about it. Being locked in one scale. People are pushing the boundaries now where they have handpans with that you can transfer between minors and majors, depending on the note layout. And so they're really pushing the boundary into a more chromatic style where they can. But in a lot of ways, there's this beautiful simplicity that I've always loved about just having one handpan in my lap with 8, 9 notes and just drawing out as much as I can from that. It's kind of like I used to play a drum set that was 10 pieces, right? And in the end, I thought I was doing a lot of different stuff, but I was pretty much doing the same fill in different places on the drum set all the time. And when I cut my drum set down, because I got lazier and lazier and I was tired of hauling this thing around for every gig, I cut down to like a little 4-piece kind of jazz kit, and my drumming got much better, like much better, because now I couldn't cheat by just hitting somewhere else and making it seem like, oh, that's new. Now I actually had to start playing with different ways to make it sound like a bigger kit, different kinds of fills. And I think the handpan can kind of do the same thing, where over the years you're watching people really push the boundary of how to make it just more than just hitting 8 notes in succession, and different styles of composing on a little bit. Even I've watched people compose on like an 8-piece. I don't know how you have an 8-note handpan and you're making it sound like there's all these different scales going on, because some people are really good at being able to draw it out. And so so as far as how it's developed over the years and what people are doing with it, it's still so young. I think right now we're seeing a lot more a lot more people putting it into full group music, pieces.
I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah. So it's going from less handpan centric to more. It's becoming an instrument, which is really kind of cool to watch too. It's not just. The handpan world for a long time, I think, really just they loved albums that were just handpan alone.
Yeah.
And it's kind of and for a while, I think some musicians were really struggling to see how to even fit it in. It's a different timbre. It's like couldn't just like take a metal band and throw a steel drum in there very easily. You're really gonna have to work at it.
Yeah.
And I think the handpan took a little work to really understand. I don't know, how does it feel in a big group, and like where does it seem to fit best, and who can draw out what. And it's like I'm a firm believer that any instrument can work in any band in any genre when done correctly.
Yeah.
But it does seem like there's some that just tend to lean a little more easily into that and more naturally.
For sure.
And so finding what people are coming up with now with the handpan, where what kind of world music they're fitting in, and what kind of pop style, or you're hearing it in video games now, and we're hearing it in like movie tracks or TV show tracks and everything. So it's kind of cool. It's starting to become an instrument in the world that is less
legitimizing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's such a. I remember the first time that I heard one. My buddy showed me. It was a video on YouTube. I'm pretty sure. Showed me it, and he called it a hang drum or something like that. I was like, oh, this is called the hang drum.
Yeah.
Before anyone knew anything about it, and I was like blown away. I'm like, I need to get one of these. But I remember also seeing somebody on the street playing one. This was a couple years later when I was traveling, and I was really into busking for a number of years. I used to hitchhike around the country, and busking is its own really interesting platform because in order to make any money, you have to catch people's attention, and that doesn't just come from playing well. Like there are people who are amazing, but they get on the street and they don't play loud enough to catch anyone's attention, or they just don't have the personality for it. Or on the other hand, somebody who's not very good at all, but has a gimmick or something can really crush it. And I remember seeing this kid sitting down playing it, and clearly, he maybe just got it or had it for a while, or he's borrowing it or something, who knows, but it sounded amazing to me, because I'd never heard it before. I mean, I heard it on video, but it was like that, it's like, it's this instrument that is immediately like gratifying in that way, and people can do cool things with it. And I remember the first time that somebody put one in my hands and allowed me to play it, and I just like went to town, like exploring all the sounds, and I sat there for like 2-3 hours straight just jamming on this thing. And I've been wanting one forever because of that moment, and like also the fact that they're hard to get and they're expensive is an interesting element to put in there. But I really like talking about that because it's I have such a personal experience with it in that same way, where it's like there's all these really unique features to this instrument that don't come from a lot. And it's also got, like you were saying, the beautiful simplicity of it. Like the first time I saw anyone playing like traditional instruments, especially out of Africa, like gourd instruments, ngoni and stuff like that, like 5-6 strings or something, but no frets, it's like a harp, and you have to just make that work, and you think like, how can you keep that interesting? But there's like hundreds of years of songs that are passed down through that, and there's this level of innovation that comes through with it, that simplicity that I find so beautiful. And it's really cool to see like a modern representation of that.
Definitely.
Would you mind playing something, since we've been going off about it for quite some time here?
Yeah.
I want to...
Hopefully this isn't too loud.
Yeah, I'll adjust the mic here. And,
sure.
I know that the handpans ring out like crazy. I'll just turn it around. Turn it down here. Just give it a little test.
Sure.
Such a great sound. Is that original composition, or is that something just jamming?
No, I just jam. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you that anyway. Do you write? Well, I was gonna ask you to play something else too.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But do you write?
I don't.
No?
don't.
You just jam.
I just play. Yeah. Yeah. I've always just played. I find that I struggle writing only because I get pretty instantly bored. And so like if I try to do the same thing over, like I can come up with a cool riff one day and really enjoy it, and for some reason the next day when I go play it again, it's the exact same way, the same thing. I'm instantly like and I just like get bored and I want to play something else.
Yeah.
And so I really struggle with composing, which is funny. Is our band that I was in would compose like 10-minute long songs, and they had like beautiful transitions from like really heavy things to these beautiful soundscapes to all that. And I was always in the background writing the percussion for it, or like always like, but mostly they were doing all the melody. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because like as a drummer, I love composing a new song and like seeing where the new parts were gonna go. Yeah. And on the handpan, I've always loved the idea that I could sit down and just not think really. Like I didn't really want to be. I just never had a desire to be a composer on it. And there's some really really amazing people composing handpan pieces, but. I've been more on the line of I just like to sit down and just improv all the time. And I don't think I've actually ever written a single piece in the 13 years. It's always been something improv. Yeah.
That's so interesting. It's like the exact opposite of me. I've always been a music composer, a writer, like songwriting and melodies and stuff. And the very moment I picked up an instrument, I knew I wanted to write music.
Cool.
I wanted to create my own thing, which, both are totally fine. It's just interesting how people gravitate towards things like improvisation is such a it's a relatively new element in my life. I mean, the last couple of years I've gotten more into it, but it seems like that's what you do.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's I think what really pushed my boundaries too is when I played at that restaurant at the time, I had a Panart Hang that was only had 8 notes altogether. And I had to play for 3 hours, 2 nights in a row. Oh, yeah. And at the time, that's all I had was 8 notes for 6 hours. To play 8 notes was, after a while, maddening. I was like, I don't know how to make this sound anything. And then I just started really pushing the boundary on I would just pretty much shut off my brain. Like, I don't know. All I'm going to do is just drop my hands somewhere. Yeah. And then I'm going to drop them again. And then whatever happens, I'm going to do it 3 or 4 times. Yeah. And then it would be like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. It's like anything, I can't remember who the famous musician is. It's just like, you never really mess up if you do it 2 times in a row. So.
Chet Atkins.
Yeah.
He would say that exact same thing. He said, like if you ever play a wrong note, just play it twice and pretend like it was supposed to be there.
Yeah, and then really, if you want to drive it home, do it 8 times, and then now it's a new riff, And so that's kind of like what I started doing. I would just start throwing my hands on random patterns and just kind of see, or I would just start like turning off my brain about the melody and tripping myself up, being like, man, I'm only playing these 8 notes, so it's got to be getting boring for everyone. And I would just kind of shut that off and be like, well, what kind of math can I play? And then I would start just trying to like toss my hands back and forth, like, okay, this one's going to be lead hand on the left the whole time. I don't know what I'm going to do, but everything's going to be like my left hand dominant, and I'm going to try to do like weird things with it and then see what happens. And then that's when like, I don't know, this idea of how to kind of shut off the brain of saying, like, telling yourself the whole time you're playing, like, this is boring, this is not whatever, having a focus on it. And so improv can be really tough for some people because I feel like they really, it's much easier to have like the safety net of having something rehearsed, right? And it's beautiful because it's really cool. You can play this over and over again, and then a composer can really like emotionally, when you've played something over and over enough, you can really start drawing out even more of that composition. Yeah. And with improv, it can be really. I mean, it's. I almost love the fear of it because it's such a gamble, and I kind of like. I don't know. I'm not a gambler by any means, but like I like. I don't know. I like to push boundaries. Yeah. And so sitting there almost kind of feels like the spotlight's on you, and you have no idea what you're about to do. Yeah. And it might be a train wreck. And
commit.
It was exactly. You got to commit to it, and it just becomes almost like a high of just sitting down and be like, I don't know what's going to come out, and those moments when you nail it, it's an incredible feeling because you have no idea that was even going to happen, and you're so in that moment, and you're so in the flow, and so it almost kind of forces you over time to learn how to stay in a flow and just allow yourself to go places that you didn't know you were going to go, and it's really scary, it's like, and it's just a different challenge, you know, and writing to me is a huge challenge. Like some people are like, I find it so hard to improv. I'm like, I find it so hard to write, you know? And so
how our brains work differently.
Yeah, exactly.
But music kind of like brings it all together and like unifies it. And I love that we just went here because I'm actually co-hosting a workshop beginning of May at the Violet Owl downtown.
Okay.
It's called Creativity in the Spiritual Path, and how improvisation is so it lends itself to everyday life, you know, and like if you do it with like you're able to kind of step out of your own way and just be wholeheartedly into what you're doing,
Right.
it becomes like this like spiritual act, you know, it becomes this like deep devotion to what you're doing.
Sure.
And we're bringing in this musician and author, Stephen Nachmanovich.
Okay.
He wrote this amazing book, I don't even, like 20 some years ago, called Free Play.
Okay.
And it was all about improvisation, and he does all improvised violin and
nice.
viola and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
he's super, like his book's incredible. You know, I always recommend it to musicians because he talks about these things exactly and how they blend. And but yeah, I think that what you're saying there is so applicable just to the human experience. You know, like when you can just devote yourself to what you're doing, shut off your brain, don't worry about the consequences of it, you know, like, and then you just keep doing it, you know, and like put your whole heart into it. And you never know what's going to come out.
Yeah, and it really, I think that mindset, you know, it's like music in general, you know, for every person, it's a different reason, different approach, you know, composing or improvising or playing guitar or playing drums. It's like we all have a reason for it.
Yeah.
But it's really neat how you can see that whatever you practice will also translate to the rest of your life too in other ways. And so, you know, practicing shutting off my brain and committing to feeling, you know, is something that I have to do on a daily basis. You know, it's like you have ideas that sometimes don't make any sense, or like directions you want to go that might not make any sense, but just you internally feel you need to go this path, or you need to follow this wind, or you need to follow whatever's going on. And I think the better I got at learning how to play improvisationally and not beat myself up and not have this like idea that it needs to be perfect, I just need to experience and be there, transfers over to, you know, how you live your life, you know. And it's like it's really helped me as a person that like I'm very kind of a control freak, you know. I struggle when things don't have their place, or if I want to make a big decision in life, I struggle if it seems risky and scary, but I also have that part of me that's kind of addicted to that too. And so learning how to play the instruments has really helped me just learn how to deal with those decisions too, and just know that I'm used to feeling this strong pull, and if it's there, I can weigh it out. I can use my control freak side to kind of weigh some of that stuff, but then use the other improv side of being like, this is just life. Sometimes you just have to make a decision, go for it, commit to it, and if it doesn't work out, you know, if it's a train wreck, you know, it's like, well, hopefully I learn from it, and next time I'm not going to stop making these decisions. I have to. We're alive. But you just get kind of better and better at practicing presence. So
yeah, it's I think I always think of music as like this microcosm of, you know, it's, you know, being a musician, obviously, like I can easily tie everything into music.
Oh, sure,
but,
yeah,
you know,
totally.
when you look at anything that you do, like whatever you're like really devoted to, like it is like this microcosm of your life. You know, like it's this tiny little example of everything that goes on within you, and it's like your level of commitment to it really determines what comes from that, you know.
Sure.
And if you don't have expectations, then you're never disappointed.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, if you have low expectations, which is hard to do, especially for musicians, you know, especially for people who are like really committed to being better, you know, or like the best, you know, like sometimes the best people are the people who stop worrying about being the best, you know, and they just put themselves into it. And like we were talking about with tabla and just like interesting instruments and stuff together. Like I've seen Zakiro saying a couple times, and I just saw him play with Bela Fleck and Edgar Meyer.
Greenville?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you go to that?
I missed it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Incredible. I mean, that was one of my favorite albums the moment that I heard it. But hearing the banjo with the tabla and an upright bass playing these crazy, like somewhat classical Indian, you know, Western and Eastern.
Yeah.
And also this modern kind of touch to everything. And like, these guys are absolute masters, and they put it together in this beautiful way, and you can tell there isn't a trace of them in it. You know, like they just burn themselves up with the whole commitment to it. You know, and it's just like those kind of moments are, to me, like so inspiring.
Yeah.
Just like my life gonna like gain something from those experiences. Seeing that kind of level of mastery.
Yeah, and watching people in that mastery, in their level, like in their element, is an incredible experience. It's like it can be in anything. I used to play a lot of pool, and North Dakota was always cold, and like they had this pool hall, and I loved playing pool when I was younger. And one of my best friends was an incredible pool player, and it was really funny. It's like even if he was just in a bar that just happened to have pool tables on the side, that were, it's not necessarily a pool hall, but he would play pool and people would just stop and watch because, it's just like he'd start playing. It's amazing to watch someone's, anything. Yeah. And, like watching people in their element, in their mastery, I think is just phenomenal. It's like, I don't have to be into the sport, but watching an amazing sport, someone that's like dedicated their life to football. Like, I don't watch football, but one time I was hanging out with my friends and I can't remember who the quarterback was that blew up and got all big, but I was watching the game and I could care less about football, and I was like, that guy's amazing, just like watching him do his thing and just nailing these passes, and like, I don't know, I have a newfound respect for it just because, just for whatever reason I connected to that moment. Yeah. I still don't like football. Yeah. But man, that was awesome,
Yeah, you're not paying attention so much to the act itself, but more like that specific commitment to what they're doing, their mastery of it. And it's a really powerful thing that I think more people should learn to recognize. Yeah. And listening to music, or watching football, it's so easy to miss that because of all the other crap going on around it, and all the other distractions of like what is good enough or what is popular enough or who's the best team, and it really, like, that's part of the fun, obviously. It's like, this game we all collectively play and we sign up for it, but when you stop and like just notice the level of commitment and mastery that people have, it like I said, it can turn someone who doesn't like football into someone who enjoys football.
So maybe I'll watch a game again. Then I got bored and I was like, oh no.
No, I'm good.
Not for me.
Well, we've been going for a while already. I wanted to just steer it back towards first I want to touch into like the specific history of the handpan, because it's not like totally, when I first heard it I was like, oh my god, there's nothing like this, right? And then I realized that there's steel drums out there, and that they've been played for who knows how long in like Caribbean music and stuff, and I never liked that sound,
right? But
the same way that they're made and everything, so but that's like a Caribbean thing, and like so Switzerland has this new interpretation of that. Do you know how that kind of came about?
Yeah, so Panart, Felix and Sabina were the two that they were steel drum builders, and it was like the steel drum had its big blow up craze in the I don't know, it was maybe around later 50s or something. I can't remember the history now at the moment, but I mean the steel drum really kind of became popular. I don't know, 1940 somewhere in there, when all the wars were going on, and Trinidad had the ships going back and forth were dumping barrels off, and they were washing up on shore, and they had all this basically garbage junk around. And there was also a lot of political turmoil during that time, and so the steel drum had came out of a lot of negative turmoil, and it was like a really kind of like a big stance of an instrument, and really kind of like politically they were not allowed to, like a lot of people in Trinidad were not allowed to congregate and make music, and they were told they weren't allowed to because there was too many, like, it was like too antisocial for them, people standing on the streets, they weren't allowed to gather anymore, and so at one point everyone kind of freaked out, like, we're having all these rules put in place, and we can't even go out and make music in public, and it's really worth looking into the history. It's like I'm doing a butchered job of like trying to explain it, but in the end they grabbed barrels and they kind of like rioted, and they just made as much noise as they could. They're walking up and down the street and just banging stuff, and then this guy kind of was like, oh, I hear a tone of this, and it was like, like, screw the patriarchy, but listen to this, it's kind of neat. And then they started learning how to make it into an instrument over years, and then Felix, so during that whole big blow up, Felix and Sabina were two that became obsessed with the sound as well. Just like all like me talking about the hung. The first time I saw it, I was just obsessed. They were the same way, and they went out and learned and started building steel drums. Went back to Switzerland, started building them there, and then the the handpan came about because they were tuning steel drums, and one musician was traveling through and wanted his steel drum retuned. And he is also a godam player. Also, like, he did a lot of East Indian percussion. And as he was having it tuned, he kind of looked at Felix. He's like, "It'd be really cool if you guys could like make something like this, but I can play with my hands, because I'm like the connection of a percussion instrument and playing with your hands versus like a drum set with sticks and stuff like that. There's just that much more of a personal element." And the guy was just like, "It'd be really neat." And they kind of joked about it. And Felix is like, "Well, what if I took the big steel drum bowl and just like flipped it over?" And he just kind of played with his hand. And we're like, "Actually, that doesn't sound too bad."
Yeah.
And then they went ahead and glued one together just to have something to set it on. They just took another one and they glued it together, and more just out of pragmatic, just like, now it can sit. But then you can imagine the steel drums are pretty deep. They can be, I don't know how much they can get up to, but on average probably around maybe 8 inches deep. And so this huge thing on his lap, it looked absolutely ridiculous. There's a picture online. It's really funny looking. He looks crazy. He's got this big upside down steel drum walk looking thing on his lap, and this is the first ever. Yeah. And then they started just dialing it down to these modes of scales, because just for size, like, we need to cut it down. So what if we just made a D minor scale or a pygmy scale or whatever these scales were? That way you could take away all these notes, shrink it down, and now it's more of a personal play. And so that's kind of how it kind of came to be in the shape or the size. And the dimples is one of the, when people talk about the difference in sound, like you were just saying, like the steel drum sound versus the handpan sound, why is one more addicting than the other? Because I've heard steel drums all my life. Yeah. At some point I've heard them, I know what they were, but I never got addicted and never got crazy like this. And a lot of it's Felix and Sabina, before they even built the Hang, they were already putting dimples on the center of notes for steel drums, because just like the idea came from the gong. The gong, there's some, I think it's the, oh gosh, right now I can't remember, but there's a gong style that has these big dimples on the middle, right? And the big center of it. And the bigger they are, sometimes they have multiple going around the circle of the center. So you have all these domes sticking out in the middle, and what that does is it jams all this tension in, and it can kind of start muting out certain frequencies. And so with the steel drum, you would have all kinds of frequencies coming out, lots of partials, and that's why it's so, to a lot of people, it's really brash or like kind of hard on the ears. It's a really loud instrument. Yeah. And when they took the kind of gong style build, they're like, well, what if we just put it, what happens if you jam all this tension in the middle with a dome and a little dimple? And they did it, and they were able to really isolate. So most steel drums, or at least the handpan, has 3 frequencies on it. You have a fundamental, octave, and a fifth on average. And without the dimple, you get a lot more of the partials coming out. You might get 6ths and 7ths and like really hot frequencies, and a lot of them. And so the dimple kind of like isolates it down to these 3 frequencies. So you get more of a pure sound versus a really wild one. And so that's where the sound kind of starts going towards the harp, piano-ish kind of a sound versus the steel drum, which is very metallic and present. And that's one of the biggest differences, really, is just being able to make it sound much softer on the ears. And again, be able to play it with your hands, and more of a personal approach to it with it on your lap and everything. So it really kind of brings that sound to like a baby you're holding. It's like right up close to you. Yeah. So
it makes all the difference. That's for sure.
It really, it's huge. It's huge sound, and I think I think there's stories about how they try to present their steel drums with these dimples in the middle to Trinidad, and all that. The steel drum is based in a lot of history as well. Like you don't change it, It's like, this is the steel drum. Here's how you make one to a point. Here's how you can do it well, but it's like it's old school. There's an old school to it, and the handpan was, the way they were doing it wasn't really. They were kind of laughed out of it. I think it wasn't really well received, and they obviously didn't like that. And there's like, whatever, and we're just gonna keep on doing it. And then it transferred over this, and it was really, really neat. The history behind the steel drum and the handpan, where it all came from. But
yeah, that is really fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah.
More than I knew before, that's for sure.
Sure, yeah.
And it's that's the beauty of becoming a nerd about something, you know.
Yep,
Like
exactly.
You learn the history, you learn like who played it, you know, you remember the names and.
Yeah, and the idea of being able to be behind this instrument since it was 5 years old, and watching it grow and watching the community around it grow and change and morph, and just kind of seeing it become its. It's almost like watching a child grow up in a way. It's like you're going to see like what place in life it's building, like who's connecting, and
That's really it's so fascinating, and like to go from the passion of playing it to now you're building them, you're tuning them, you're doing this whole thing like that. That's a whole other level.
Yeah.
That's your obsession goes deep.
Yeah. It's like the whole thing where I almost always regret looking behind the curtain, but I can never resist it. And when I was, in a band, I thought watching an audio engineer record a band was like this magician sitting here doing all these crazy cool things, and then I jumped behind that, and I was like, this is really frustrating and really hard, and I like to just play music and watching that. And it's the same thing with building Handpans. And it's like I've loved getting behind the curtain, but it has also made it harder to play because now you've trained your ear to always be looking for flaws. And so I actually, in a lot of ways, enjoy playing people's instruments who like that someone else built to a point, only because it's like I don't pick apart other people's work near as much as my own. And so if it's something I had my hands on to build, I can't stop pointing out the littlest, or my head only hears these tiny little things I wish were better. And then when I play someone else's, I'm like, whatever, I didn't build it, I didn't see it under the microscope, and I can just get lost and enjoy it for what it is. And so it's got this kind of duality behind building and being a player of what you're building. So
it's a complicated relationship.
Definitely.
Hey, you work for Saraz, and that's a local company. I just want people to know, what you do.
So I started tuning these with Mark Garner owns Saraz, and years ago he had so about 5 years ago, 6 years when I first met him, he's like, hey, you should learn how to tune. I think you'd really enjoy it. And then CFoulke as well is another really well-known builder. He said the same thing. It's like, you seem like a personality would really enjoy tuning. And I was like, cool, that's crazy. I'm just like, I like to play. And then I got home, all I kept on hearing is like, maybe you should tune. And it was like, and I didn't like my job before. I was RV tech before. I worked with kids for a while. Lost my job there because of money. They quit funding it, and so everyone got laid off. So I took the next job I could get easily, and I just became an RV tech, which is super random. And ended up loving it because I learned how to do a whole bunch of different things. Learn new tools, learn different trades. We had to do everything from fixing ACs to fixing the wooden steps, or working with fiberglass or HVAC. I mean, it was like so many different things. And so it was cool like that, but it was not exactly going to be my lifelong thing, and I didn't know what I was going to do with life. And I was kind of at a really, really tough point with that. I was getting close to turning 30, and I had no idea what I was going to do with anything, and I felt like I needed to find that. And I was struggling for years. Actually, I was really struggling on what I wanted, what I could see myself doing for the future. And RV teching wasn't it. Working with kids was great, but that wasn't going to be it. I was going to school. I had gone to college for sociology and criminal justice, and I realized that those aren't things that were for me. And it was just like the constant search, and then when two people planted the seed, and I couldn't let it go. And I knew I loved the instrument. I've been playing it for years at this point. And so I was like, you know what, I don't like my job, I might as well just try. Let's try it out and see what happens. And I started learning how to tune, and Mark found out that I was kind of teaching myself, and CFoulke, it was a huge help to me learning how to tune at the beginning. And he was like, man, well, if you want to join me, I can't keep up with work, and I wanted out of North Dakota, and I didn't want that job. I was like, this is amazing. My wife was like, yes, let's do it.
That's what brought you here?
That's what brought me here. It was actually to work with Saraz. And so and since then, I now do retunes. I have a website for doing retunes of Handpans, and so I work on anybody. Not anybody's build. There's some rough instruments out there I won't touch, but not very many. And so I started Rivera steel tuning is my that side business that I do.
Cool.
So that's just like, I don't know, I guess the luthier of handpans. We haven't come out pansmith maybe. Is like, we're trying to figure it out. Trying to figure out a name for that. But so that's I went from playing, and then I started tuning and building about 6 years ago,
and now it's your life.
Shop
set up in your basement.
Yeah. So that's exactly it. I'm starting to build up a shop in my basement. I've been tuning at home for a long time, and now I know we got this property, we got this land out here, and I'm happy really not leaving it ever. And so I started building up all the stuff here to kind of keep me busy. So I do the audio mastering, which we showed you. I have like a mastering room, which I dabble with that on the side for musicians, and then the two, the retuning stuff, and then working for on Saraz Handpans. And yeah, so this is kind of like my little abode that we've always been kind of dreaming of, and never realized I would end up in Fletcher, North Carolina as a kid,
Cool place, though.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. We're out in the middle of nowhere-ish, but also totally not. Like, you can jump on the highway and we're like there. So it's like we feel like we've got some privacy and all that good stuff, but then we also feel like we're out of the city. And so, yeah.
No, that's great, man. It's cool to, like, when you're saying it, for me, I can see, like, you're in your 30s now, your late 30s, and you're, doing what you love, and you got the spin, but it also, like, ties back to your first thing about being 7 years old and watching that drum kit, like, knowing that you're obsessed with it, and this is your passion, and you feel deep inside, but we always are so afraid to actually follow that.
It's very true.
At least our conscious, effort. Like, oh no, I'll just work on RVs.
Oh yeah. I mean, almost any change I've ever made in life, I was told by somebody that was a bad idea at some point. Every time I've wanted to change, if I wanted to quit a job to go on to someone else, that owner of that job or that boss was always like, it's a bad idea. Yeah. And if I told my parents I want to do this, it's not like that. My parents were very encouraging of a lot of things, but it's like, as a parent, you know how many times your kids are like, I want to do this. They're like, that's a bad idea. But in the grand scheme, when I look back, I've pretty much been obsessed with sound. Like my entire life has always been about sound, and when I realized that was so consistent, then eventually it was just like, there's no escaping it. Like, where can I find avenues to live off this, and like what kind of things are even available? And like I was told by my last boss that, like, going to tune handpans, this is a really bad idea. And which, I mean, it's crazy, it's like, it is kind of one of those, like, can you make money doing this? And I was like, I don't know, but I know that I don't like this. And so if I can't, at least I'm forcing myself out of a place I was not happy with into an open book again, even though it's terrifying to go into this open space where you don't know what's going to happen. I knew I was not happy in that one space, and if I was just going to stand there, it just wasn't going to be healthy, for any relationship or myself. And so
you gotta trust that intuition about it. And, it seems like it's paying off for you. So.
We've been really enjoying this path, and it's been really fortunate so far. So
awesome. Well, great, man. This has been super enlightening. I've always loved the handpan, but like certainly never knew as much as I now know about it. And hopefully other people will feel that same way. And just good talking with you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Would you mind playing one more thing before we close it out? Turn this mic back around. And real quick, you already mentioned your website, but is there anything else you want to put out there for people to contact with you or anything like that?
I mean, it's like, it's kind of funny, as I do almost like all my audio mastering work and like the retunes and all that stuff, I pretty much just use my RiveraSteelTuning.com website. And even that doesn't advertise mastering audio, but I think I'm going to add that and kind of tie it into as like a service, because a lot of people that send me handpans are musicians, know, and so they want to tune up, and a lot of times they want to tune up because they're recording. And so I was like, this is actually kind of great, I can probably just put another side thing on here. It's like, audio work there. And then as far as working with Saraz, we build and sell instruments through SarazHandpans.com. And you can find out a lot of information. We have tons and tons of information on that website of everything, the history of the instruments, lots of different building aspects about it, different scale lists, and you can watch all kinds of videos. I am on those almost, I'd say 99% of the videos that I get to play, and so awesome. So
what is this model that you're playing here?
So this one is a B minor scale. So it actually has a B, starts on a B, and then let's see. So it's kind of fun. It's really fun to learn. So as a drummer, I never really understood. It's like, cool, well, B minor, and then you start learning what variations of scales are. And this one, I'm not totally sure right now because I'm still terrible at music theory. But a lot of times the different modes, the handpan world loves to name their scales. Like different kind of like. I couldn't explain where the names come from a lot of times. But, some are called Big Bear, sometimes it's called, a Magic Hour or whatever.
Interesting.
And so, they could still be D minors, but the difference in the names I never really understood until one day. It's like, oh, all it really is like maybe this is like a D minor that leaves out the 6th, or this one adds the 7th, or leaves, it's like, what does it leave out of the full scale?
Yeah.
And that's what they name it after.
Oh, okay.
And so I couldn't even tell you what this one would be named.
Yeah.
But,
well, you're just improvising, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Everything is improvising.
It's kind of hard to say what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Yeah. Well, whatever strikes you.
Cool.
I'd love
Cool.
to hear it.
I like trying to hear those swells. Like every once in a while, you get the handpan and like hit it just right, and you can start getting these octaves and fifths to really start swelling up with it.
Yeah, well, and you were explaining how it has the 3 notes that are coming out of each one of them, the overtones and stuff. And obviously, I've never thought about it when playing, just because I've never had one to like really sit down with. But I can totally hear the difference in it when you say that,
Yeah.
And when you let it ring out, especially like.
Yeah, it's really cool. Is you got the fundamental, and like say the B is like the fundamental note, and then you have the octave and a fifth. So yeah, you got 3 notes in this one tone field.
Do each one of how did you play that?
Yeah. So you have an oval shape for everyone that hasn't seen it yet.
Yeah.
It's an oval shaped note, and then the full the entirety of the note has a fundamental, so this is a B3, and so you can really hear, that's what you're pretty much going to dominantly hear is a B3.
Yeah.
And then there's also the octave, which is a B4, which is on the long axis of the oval. So like down the center, the long way is going to be, it's going to ring out an octave. And you can isolate that by muting the short axis of the oval. And so I can put my finger here and just get just the octave. And then you can move over and mute the long axis, and on the short axis you have a fifth. And so then you can isolate that and get... And that's kind of cool, you can do little bends. Yeah, nice. And then, so it's really cool. You can use that technique or that knowledge to really draw out different things in your composition. So
how do you do it on these side ones?
So it's kind of cool. It's almost like a tabla technique that you can use, where you can mute the long axis with your, say, ring finger, and then tap it with your forefinger. And so let's see if I can even do it right now. Now I'm doing terrible. And some people are just masters at this. Dan Mulqueen's like one of my favorite players too, and he's really good at just being able to he can isolate those and just fly across the instrument and hit all fifths and all octaves or whatever. And so it's like, for me it's easiest on this center note. So you can treat that as like. And it's cool, because then it's like now we're not just hitting the full note, but you can just pull out the different partials and do cool things. So.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a fun instrument.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. I really appreciate you playing and sharing all your knowledge with us, and just great conversation. So.
Definitely. Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. It's a privilege, man. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.